Yo, everybody who is coming on board to Diversity Factors D&I Online Lab Talk. We're just slowly admitting people into the talk. So I'm going to paddle a bit for the next 1 minute while we have people coming on board. Welcome to the great online trials and tribulations. I can see people are still joining. So yeah. I'm still paddling and admitting people into Diversity Factors D&I Lab Talk. So hang on and we will admit you as quickly as we can. And to all of you who are in, I can't see you, but it's nice that you're here. We have been looking forward to seeing you. So I'm just going to paddle a bit for the next 1 or 2 minutes and then have everybody in the room together with us. Again, if you're just joining us, thanks for joining Diversity Factors D&I Online Lab Talk today about how to communicate without excluding, aka the art of framing. I'm sitting here and admitting people into the Zoom call, so I'm maybe paddling a bit for the next 1 minute or so. And getting everybody into the room. We still have people coming on, but for those of you who are here already, it's nice to see you, although I can't see you, but it's nice that you're here and want to join this talk with us. So I'm just going to give it 1 more minute, and then we're going to slowly but surely kick off. Yeah. Here we have a lot of people coming in again. So I'm still admitting for those of you who are in the room, it's good to have you here. It's nice to see you, although I can't. Welcome to Diversity Factors Online D&I Lab Talk, where we will discuss the art of framing, aka how to communicate diversity and inclusion without excluding anybody in that transformation process. So I'm going to paddle maybe 1 more minute in order to ensure that everybody is coming on, but let's just slowly kick it off. So this is Diversity Factors online D&I Lab Talks. They're designed out of our D&I Lab community, where we meet up with professionals working with diversity and inclusion around 4 times a year for a physical meeting. But then we also do these lab talks online in order to scale more knowledge and more information about D&I into everybody's attention, not so that it's just people working with diversity and inclusion. And last time we were together in our D&I Lab community, we asked our members what they wanted to talk about, what was most pressing on their mind right now. And they said how to communicate diversity and inclusion and how to communicate that whole transformational journey that diversity and inclusion really is. And for me, being an old head of comms and an old head of media relations before I actually ventured into this life of diversity and inclusion, that was actually a great opportunity, because then I could get the old band together, so to speak. But it is also the way to dive into what we also view as a very key driver of diversity and inclusion, and that is how to use strategic communication to get everybody on board in that journey. So we reached out, and I'm about to say to the one and only Louise Mønder, who's here on screen with me right now. And she's waving. I love it. I'm still admitting people, Louise, so if I look a bit strange, it's just because people are still coming on board. But maybe a small disclaimer, because Louise and I have actually known each other for many, many years. Louise was my mentor, my sponsor for many, many years. First when I worked in Dong Energy, as it was known back then, but also in Maersk. And she's also a very good friend today. She's been my boss, she's been my mentor, she's been my sponsor, but most importantly of all, she is a good friend to me. But she's probably also the lady within Denmark, and I would actually say international, who knows most about how to drive transformation processes. She was part of the establishment of Dong Energy back in the days when 6 companies merged together into one. She has been part of the separation of the oil and oil-related businesses in Maersk, and lately she was part of the separation of the TDC group. So she knows a bit about how to drive transformational processes. So I could rave about Louise like forever, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to give the word quickly over to you, Louise, so you can maybe present yourself also.
Thank you, Helene, for the kind words. So yes, I have been working with transformation for more or less 16 years now, of all kinds, mainly within changes of business, either mergers or split up, but also changing the values and structures of companies. Whether it makes me an expert, I can't say that I have a 100% success rate, because these transformations are very difficult. It takes a lot, and we'll get back to this today. But just a short introduction. Yes, I started my career in Dong in connection with the merger, and that was in when I was 30. Yeah. So that's a lot of years now. Yeah. And in 2011, I came to Maersk to promote at that point the energy part of Maersk. We were only talking about vessels at that point, and they wanted to have more focus on the energy part, the oil business. And a couple of years later, I was actually also on the team selling the oil business of Maersk. So that was quite a journey. And the last 2.5 years I spent in TDC Group, with the split of TDC Group into New Day and TDC. As a background, as a business journalist and a criminologist, and you will probably notice the latter in some of the things I'm talking about today, because it's a lot about sociology and psychology when we do major transformations. And just lovely to see so many familiar names I haven't seen for a long time, for the many years. So lovely to see the names. Hope to see your faces at some point, if possible.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for joining us, Louise. You're more than welcome to turn on your screens. You're also welcome to keep them off if you're sitting at home in your PJs and you just want to relax with your coffee in the couch. That is also quite okay. This is a safe space for everybody. We're about to say. We're recording this talk so that if you have to step out, you can watch it later when we send it out, or if some didn't have the opportunity to show up, it will also be sent to them. Lastly but not leastly, you're more than welcome to ask Louise and I questions. It's much easier for me if you do it via the chat function, because then I can monitor that as we speak. But other than that, raise your hands. I also have the list of participants in the sidebar here. So jump in if there's anything you want to know. Now, we're basically just going to jump into the talk. Louise and I are not really those PowerPoint slides kind of people. We actually like that ongoing flowing conversation, and we have developed a lot of communications projects just on the background of brainstorming and talking over a bunch of coffees. So, but before we start talking directly about transformation, Louise, what is strategic communications? Because sometimes I get this feeling that we don't really know what it is that we're working with when we work with strategic communications. So just from your overall, now I'm putting you in the expert box, but what is strategic communication?
To me, strategic communication is a systematic planning of what you want to achieve with a clear milestone on how you want to do it. It's closely linked to the business strategy and the values and the purpose of your company and the world you are a part of. So it's actually planning in detail what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it, and who you want to bring on that journey, recognizing that they are not all equal and have the same starting point for receiving the communication. People will be at a lot of different levels. when you communicate. So it's communication with a long-term horizon, where you need to figure out different phases of the communication in detail. To me, it's not, I think we've all been there in corporate communication. We get the memo from the board or the management that now we are going to be a diverse and inclusive company, or we are going to split the company. It's going to be great. Thoughts that have probably been made of 10 to 12 people. They are all on board. They all see the benefit. Our job, whether you're in, I would say finance, communication, HR, or group functions, will be to translate that into a meaningful journey for everybody in a company. One of the very important things is that what is you want to achieve for the company, and not what you want to achieve for the board and the management. I often hear, we are doing this because the board wants us to, or the management wants us to. It's about working into detail what you want to achieve for the company in going on this journey. So it's quite a detailed work, and I've actually never seen it done with great success if you're not involved more or less all staff functions. For your field, Helena, I would imagine it's often HR and communication, and there's a lot about, we need to communicate this to people. The problem about transformations are they're not changes. Transformation is large changes. It's when you, change a fundamental thing about something. So when you talk about large transformations impacting business today, that would be climate change, that would be IT and technology, it will be diversity and inclusion. So you're talking about the big things where you change the norms, not only in society, but also in your company. And my experience is that there's where you really need to go into the detail, because if there's something people really don't like, even though they can see the benefit, it's change. Because we go around every day, do our thing, and feel safe in the environment we are with, the people we are together with the mission we have as a company. And when you start turning around those things, you will see resistance in even the most intelligent, hardworking, loyal employees. So it's about getting into the details, strategic communication, and plan.
You said something funny, because and I remember this also. There's 12 people in a room, the board or the senior management, and they all agreed that now we have to do this. For example, we have to do diversity and inclusion, either because we are at a company size where we legislatively, for example, in Denmark, have to set diversity targets for gender representation. A lot of the companies are under that law where they have to do that and have to report on that. And then they all are in alignment, they're all in agreement, and then they go out at a town hall, and the head of comms is standing there next to them, and they deliver a couple of key messages, and then that's it. And then everybody is like, okay, but what does this mean? Is the fruit cancelled in the canteen, or is there still coffee, or does this mean I lose my company car when I get promoted, and so forth? You talk about these different, knowing the individual target groups. What do you actually do then that as a strategic communication? How do you map that out?
So I think we see this not only with diversity and inclusion. I think there's a lot of people here that have seen that when we're talking about the sustainability agenda too. So we, from a business point of view, corporate operations love to have PowerPoints and memos, and we get, long PowerPoints and memos about all the stuff we want to do, and you will never see it executed. We think that if you can sum it up and say, we are here, we want to go here, blah, 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 and then everything is fine. Most of those end on a shelf somewhere, getting dusted, but they never really create a result, because the problem is about transformation. It's actually not about, PowerPoints, KPIs for management, or bulletins on your intranet. It's about people and connections. So I would say for large transformation, people, ambassadors is the most important thing. So I would start by figuring out what is it actually the board or the management want to achieve. I would set up, and have done this, a meeting where you can challenge. So why are we doing this? Because you need to know where the people that invented the idea come from. What do they actually expect? Do they, as you pointed to, they want to have a part in the sustainability report or the annual report where they can say they do the right thing, or do they actually want to achieve a change? Because that's very different from how you address this. I would probably also spend some time getting them to the point where they actually want to achieve the change. From a communication point of view, that's much easier to work with. We have all seen companies through time that have said they wanted to do something but didn't do it. So when you start a process of transformation, whether it's the basics of your company, a change of structure, a change of business, or it's about changing your purpose or your culture with diversity and inclusion, for example, you really need to make those people that make the decision understand that if you want to do this, it will take much more than you would ever believe, because you're changing something fundamental. So I would start with the board and management, have some good discussions. I would discuss with peers. That's always very beneficial. You will experience that people have a lot of different views, people from different functions, both in the business or in a staff function, wherever you are, on change or that specific transformation, what it would mean to them, or how they see how it would impact the business. That's the first thing, to get your internal stakeholders. Then there's a lot, I would always advise a lot of research. So how is this perceived around us? So what are the benefits of the challenges of a transformation like that? You can be a listed company where if you say, I go out, I want to be a diverse and inclusive company. So would your investors think that was something you should spend your time on right now? Are you a business in deep trouble? Are you a business where you're not trusted in the society in general, either due to your way of performance or the way you communicate? Who are the main stakeholders externally in a debate like this? So if we take diversity and inclusion, I think we all know, and that's again the same as sustainability, very difficult areas to actually transform and change in a company, because the views changes a lot and they are very either to this side or this side, and they can both pose threats and opportunities, even though against you can actually be a benefit at some point, depending on how you go around it. These will also be the stakeholders that your employees listen to or group with. So you need to know your external setup too, and how your business is perceived.
Okay, so a lot, basically. And now, I agree with you on this, because when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we are talking about redesigning the way we have perceived leadership, redesigning the way we have perceived managerial roles, redesigning just the way that we do business in a lot of sense. We often refer back to the reference default leader, which is often the white guy with a Western lifestyle. He actually in construction and architecture and car design manufacturing have a specific height and weight also. So we have designed a lot of our world and our norms around a certain default type. And that default type is, of course, also present in the way we run our companies and our organizations. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I think many people often think that it's very easy to go in and say, okay, I want more females into the boardroom, or I want more females in C-level. And then we are like, yeah, but that's not going to happen unless you change the way you have driven your company previously to a new redesign. And that's where the transformation comes into it. When we advise companies, we often find that we can do more havoc in certain companies when we go in with this approach about diversity and inclusion being a transformational journey. Because basically we find that some companies simply aren't ready for it yet. They need a certain maturity level to get to that point. If we just look isolated on strategic communication, and then of course in the perspective of driving transformation, what kind of maturity level do you need in an organization, in your comms department, for example, in order for the communications team to support these transformational changes?
Yeah,
Be kind.
Yes. No, but I think it's not only, to be honest, always about only the communication department. So I think a lot of transformation is in general about stakeholder relations, and there's a lot of people, whether they work in HR or in communication or in sustainability or in finance, that are great stakeholder managers. And I think it's, to actually succeed with transformation, you need to have, so if you look at the communication department, great stakeholders. And when I say that, it's people that know the organization, that's not afraid to go and ask questions on the floor, who's actually interested in meeting someone at the coffee machine to, you know, discuss whatever is going on in the company. You know, they know the temperature of the company. And that is, and you also have different, you said it could be a long, and they're maybe not ready. It could be a long journey. So for that, I'd always start, it is a long journey. I think people on this talk that's worked in, who's working in Ørsted, has been working in Ørsted, know that the transformation from Ørsted to become what it is today was not made overnight. The thoughts about being a green company started 15 years ago. People have been working in Maersk, also familiar transition will know that, you know, you're not building a new logistics company overnight. So it's also something about expectation management, and I think that's always important for a communication department, whether it's internal or external. When the boss come and say, you know, you need to ensure I have a good image, or you need to ensure blah 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 internally, expectation management is important. And one of the good things, I think, with a strength in a communication department is if they're good at making Q&As, not actually for the management, but to kind of call out the things that can be a challenge. You can invent quick. In the old days, Q&As were just like a long invention of, I can figure out 100 questions you can be asked. But what are the right questions? What if we're asked, where will you be in 5 years? Do you have a KPI? How will you go around? What will their answers be? Because then you can start challenging management and other stakeholders. Another great tool, I think, for what we're talking about here is, I think we all do these My Voice or whatever they're called in different companies every year, taking the temperature of the organization. You can easily, when you start working with this, put in a new 5 questions about this area and see where people are. And you will be surprised. I have done that twice. You'll be surprised where people are. It's not that they don't get it, they just don't really want it, because it's a change and it might have an impact on their job or their personality or person. So I think the maturity is about great stakeholder management and being able to have that outside-in perspective and not just be dragged, you know. And I think all professional people here, so we all know it's not about what the boss says we should do. It's about, you know, helping the organization achieve what we want to do. So, and that might not be the way that the board and management thought it should be.
Nope. So, transformation, going into how do you then do it? Now we set the stage as a bit about strategic communication, and I think from what I take away from you is that strategic communication is actually more about stakeholder management first and foremost than it is about sitting down and writing that key message. That is the production side of it, but you have to go in, ask the why questions again and again and again, challenge that why questions, and understand how this is perceived with every stakeholder, both internally but also externally. But then when you go into, okay, we decided we want to do diversity and inclusion. We want to be an inclusive company where diversity thrives. Yes, we are also obliged by Danish law to set targets for gender representation, for example, in managerial positions, and we have to report on those every year, but we have set forward that diversity and inclusion and an inclusive culture is the way to practice our people development and so forth going into the future. Now, I meet a lot of change resistance on that. A basic example is, for example, with the gender diversity targets, which are often, it's from the underrepresented gender, which is often the women in leadership position, that the men go, no, don't want to do that. It's not the men in top leadership. It's actually not them. But when you go down, for example, to middle managers, Jørgen or Søren or Kim or Lars will be sitting there and be like, yeah, what's in it for me then? I don't really want to do that because I potentially lose a promotion now if you're doing that. So that's one of the first things in terms of change resistance that we see when we advise. But if we just take it into the helicopter a bit again, how do you drive transformation processes? How do you transform? You've done the why, you challenge the C-level, we're all in alignment, you want to do the best for the organization and you want to future-proof. What do you do?
First of all, you have to understand how people perceive change and experience change. There's a lot of studies within this, and I would assume that that's also a thing that you would be able to work with HR on from a communication perspective, because there's a lot of very famous curves on how people perceive change and transition and commitment and what are actually human needs. And the problem is, I think a main problem in transformation is that a lot of people think it's change management. But when you transform something, I think we all experienced COVID as a transformation. And we all know that, we got used to it. There's a new rule. We couldn't do this and we couldn't do that. And we all talked about all the benefits. We also talked about it was difficult and wanted to go to work and we missed our family and it was scary. But we also, we had more walk, we had more time with our family. There was a good thing, a lot of good things. And when we opened up, we all said that we will only do this kind of meetings. We can all work from home. Everything will be perfect. We will save a lot of CO2 now. Everything will be perfect. Give a human being 30 days and they go back to what they knew. Oh, all the doors were open. We do this. And I think one of the problems about transformation is that management and people in general think it's just about changing something. But if you want to and they want a big bang. So Helene, can you, give me a plan for when I can launch this internally and externally? I want to be on the front page of Financial Times, the Børsen and Berlingske, and then we will do something coordinated, and maybe we will have, breakfast for the employees in the morning and a big town hall, and we will transmit it to all, globally. We will tell everybody about this. This is going to be a party, and we'll be famous, and we'll beat all the other companies. You don't do transformation like that. People are not, oh, great, I got a croissant and a town hall, and then everything is perfect. Transformation where you need to change something in people, the norms, the way they view the world, when you challenge what would be a risk, as you said before. Some mid leaders will be concerned that, will my job go to someone else? Or what about the promotion I've been waiting for in 5 years? Will they take Louise instead? They will start behaving rational. I've seen that both in diversity and inclusion discussions, but also in major transformation. Highly intelligent, calm, rational people will act like maniacs. And it includes myself. Things will happen in your head you can't imagine, because change and transformation is difficult, because you need to change something that's inherent in you and the way you see your workplace and what it is to you and how it's a habit and a lifestyle for you. And when they start, picking in all this, they change something. You get insecure. You get into fights with people you love to work with about small, stupid things. People tell unpleasant jokes to cope. They do all kind of stuff. Or they start, we all seen that in diversity inclusion. So can we have Christmas lunches going forward? Because apparently we can't drink anymore, because if we drink, I might say something nice to this woman standing over here. People just get, like teenagers, actually. You see that you'll see that during transformation, that corporate businesses start behaving like it was, 14 years old. People just do rational things. So my advice would always not go for the big launch. In general, I have this theory that the most companies should only talk about things that's actually achieved and not things they want to achieve, because that's much more convincing. There can be a benefit in talking about externally that you're on a journey, because as we all know, most employees read the newspaper and trust that more for some reason than internal media. That's an entire different talk. But there could be good ideas about talking about what you are trying to achieve with your company. Maybe not do the big launch, but do it, that could be, for example, start with engagement survey. Where are we? So what could we change? And step by step change. You will not achieve this in a year. No company will go from being not inclusion and not diverse and in a year just be the perfect example of diversity inclusion. Because diversity inclusion touch upon so many things. As you said, it's not about women and men only. It's about men being different, women being different, having different backgrounds, having different language, different culture. People working in global companies will know that we're not alike. I can go to the US because we see the same series, and I say, oh, I know that, we understand each other. Come to a country that has completely different belief around or different norms, or you can go to UK or Sweden. We are not alike. So just remembering that will teach you that you can do this in a year. So you have a long time horizon with steps and steps and steps and fallback plans. So if we hit a rock, and that could be certainly the company is coming into financial difficulties, or we have a pandemic, will we then still fuel this discussion? Or how do we include this discussion why we have a pandemic or why we have financial issues? There'll be a lot of things that will push back, especially transformation has something to do with norms, or we need to do things very differently. So again, sustainability and inclusion would often be areas where we say, oh, we put that aside, that's a bit expensive to focus on now because we have bigger issues. But for example, I see the pandemic we've just been through was actually very healthy for the diversity and inclusion discussion, because we also learned something else, that we're not only men and women and of different cultures, we're all introverts and extroverts, and we had to sit at home. How did that impact people? So you can always take a transformation into any change a company is going through, but you just have to be prepared.
I think that is, I really, really like the thing about not doing the big bang. But I know we agree on this, just both in terms of communications, just
if you want to fail, you should do it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't do exactly for any transformation, do small steps, small steps, small steps. And yes, again, use the front page of any newspaper or any television show to communicate to your employees. They don't trust what is on the intranet, but they do trust what is on the front page of Financial Times. I think that is the best trick Louise and I can give to anybody in a communications department. And also the journalists trust more what is on your intranet, and then they actually trust what is in the newspaper. So that the reverse also counts. But when we are doing this step by step, and we also agree to do this step by step, start with data, pull analysis. What is your representation level? What is your inclusion level? FYI, a little PR here. We can measure your inclusion from this side of the company, and pull all those analysis and so forth, and then start doing that changes, redesign into your structures, redesign into your behavioral schemes and so forth. But then we're actually also moving out now of C-level, the 12 men or the 12 people or whatever they could be, and then stepping into what we call micro level. So the individual. And when we talk about change, we often talk about what's in it for me. Because if I can't connect to it personally, then I probably won't go on that journey. So the big question now, of course, that you're getting is, how do you then frame that communication? If you don't do the big bang, if you don't do the town hall, the press release, the 20 solo interviews and the intranet article and a video and a lot of me, how do you then frame those little steps along the journey? And how do you pull it out of that boardroom and into the micro level? Because often you and I have also seen, when we have done change transformation processes in Dong or in Maersk, where we work together, that people, when they got that board briefing or that board memo, were more concerned about, okay, where am I sitting? Do I still have a desk? is where's the coffee machine located, and so forth. So in that micro level, the changes actually become more important. So how do you frame that? Big question, I know, but
so first of all, talking about C-level, is that we got through that one.
yeah.
I think for many transformation, that is actually critical with the C-level and the leaders just below C-level. Because if they don't get it, you won't get anywhere. And I see this way too often, that we want to push something to the organization and the employee on the floor needs to understand, driven by people who doesn't get it.
Yeah.
So when you do big transformation, whether you are, merging a company, splitting a company, introducing diversity and inclusion as an integrated part of your company, do I have the right leaders? And that sounds tough, and I know that's not probably for the majority of you to decide whether you have the right leaders. But what we can introduce is some kind of, you need to introduce it in steps through the management. You need to cascade the ideas and the way of working through management before you actually get to communicating to the organization. Because what you want is your leaders to communicate. As I said before, not the PowerPoint, not the bulletin, the day-to-day emotional communication. So your leadership needs to understand how to lead through this. And often communication people in many companies will, they'll get the memo together with HR, they will find out what are the key messages. And you need to get a step back, and I assume that's what you're working with here, to actually see how do we train people to lead a company this way. Because in transformation, emotions are critical. So you need to make sure that you get all the emotions out. You need to understand what is actually the barriers for a lot of the leaders in this change. And there will be barriers of all kinds. Often things you even imagine, as you say, when you get to the next level, you have this. So do we need to move? Should I sit in specific teams where we have this number of women and men, and can I do this? And do I have to be agile, or whatever people come up with of fears they have? And so transformation is about, mental practice and reinforcement constantly, where I would always advise that the leadership, it takes time. It can take months and even more just to, get the thought process started. So you start with the leadership, and then you start communicating to the employees, because then the leadership is ready to carry the communication. And yes, what do you do then? You figure out what the motivation is. What is a sustainable motivation for achieving this? So it can be diversity in teams will create more opportunities for everybody. We'll be able to think out of the box. We will start or stop doing what we used to do. It's enlightening for all people. It can be in a global company, diversity and inclusion can result in people have the chance to move around more to actually get that diversity inclusion into the company. I don't believe in bonuses and KPIs when it comes to transformation, and that's funny because I worked in companies for many years and been part of bonus and KPI, but it should not be what drives a company or human interaction. You need to see more than a bonus and a KPI.
Yep.
Because otherwise it will be something you tick off, and we all know about that. That doesn't really get under your skin. So you need to find another way to motivate people to see the benefit of it. And then all transformation need to be linked to your purpose and your values.
Yes.
So you can't take a transformation and move it away from your values and your purpose. So if that's not strong to start with, you should start there. But I think most companies, and especially one represented here, have very strong purposes and values. So you need to take every value, no matter how many you have of them, and link this to a value that people see a benefit in. Oh yeah, of course that's a part of our values, because we've always been like this. So it's recognizable, and that's the most important. They constantly need to be something recognizable, and that's why I'm not into the big bang, because people don't like big bangs in their life. They don't like to be asked to move immediately from their apartment. They don't like to have their car crashed in a moment. They just don't like it. They need to prepare for change. So leadership first, and then you can move into the organization.
Yeah. Good tips here. I really like the fact that we sometimes forget how important line management is. And one thing is to give line management a lot of key messages that is attached again to the purpose and the values and so forth. But if they're not trained on how to implement the concrete actions that comes out of those key messages, we will just basically set them up for failure. And we will not set only the transformation journey up for failure, but we will also set these poor leaders up for failure because they will not be able to drive that transformation that is so needed. And yes, big bangs are like crashing your car. Nobody likes that. So let's just get that off the table right away. Now we have around 15, 20 minutes left, and there's still room if you want to jump into the chat and ask questions. If you need that, you're more than welcome to. But I want to move on to something I think that is really, really key, and that I think we often miss when we talk about diversity and inclusion, but also strategic communication and transformation processes in general. Now, we do advise a lot of global companies, and what we see is that the conversation about diversity and inclusion in Denmark, Europe, is very much based on gender. However, when we move into the business units operations in the US, the conversation is about race. When we move into their operations in the Middle East, the conversation is about nationality and sexuality. And when we move into Asia, it's about age. And that is because the societal context or the societal discussion around these topics is on that subject. Now, we talk a lot about in Danish society overall about gender diversity. We had the second wave of Me Too with Sophia Linde and so forth, and now everybody's going out and saying we need quotas on boardrooms. We just got equal paternity rights and maternity rights for men and women, for example, just this morning, today in Denmark. However, when we open an American newspaper, or when we talk to our American clients, it will be about race, during Black Lives Matter that happened in the spring of that research after the killing of George Floyd in spring of 2020. And those conversations move into our organization. But I sometimes get this feeling that we have this perception that when our people go through the speed gates or when they log on to Teams for a meeting, it's like, now they're just Maersk, or now they're just Rambøll, or now they're just Ørsted. But there are still that human beings who have just 5 minutes previously read an article in the Danish newspaper about what is going on in society. How big a role does context play in any kind of transformational journeys?
Well, it's more or less everything. And I think, and that's why, back to why should you always test the management on things? Because I think what we all want to achieve with inclusion and diversity, I would say, is equality, being equal. Mm. We want people to have equal opportunities, because if we give everybody equal opportunities, we will probably prosper. I saw a former colleague with an interesting update on LinkedIn, where she's been on a museum and she's been talking, I think she's been reading about the Nobel Prize winners, and you go through those, they're all men. Mm. If you go back, what if we had equal opportunities? Mm. And we'd had the same amount of women with that knowledge, with, you know, living that talent? Mm. They would have been somewhere else probably. So I think it's about equality. So if you go to US, and it's about color, it's about being equal and being treated equal, giving the same opportunities. Or if you go to Denmark, it's very much focused right now about women and men. And if you go to another country, it's probably about something else, being not able to rise from, you know, the floor to management in any way, unless you're born into a family. I don't know, there'll be different culture aspects. So context is really important, and that's why you need to do those checks and balances when you start off, because what does it actually mean to us? Because if it's only about men and women, so I think some of the people here working in global companies will know that in some countries you have more women, for the fact that they're actually earning the living for their family for various reasons, and some are social, economic, and not very healthy for their society. But there will be a lot of women, they will not have this discussion. They will love their husbands to be sober, to be honest, and go to work. So you'll have different discussions. So it is about context, and that's why you need to not only talk about women and men, because we've had this discussion for years. I hated when Helena was talking about diversity and inclusion. It made me crazy when I worked with her. She did it all the time, and I couldn't see it. I didn't have a problem. I worked with men my entire life. I grew up with a father and a brother. It was fine. If I'm not on a board, it's my fault. I should just work harder. People should stop nagging and move on. Until I saw small things, the higher I came up the ladder, I saw that men were given opportunities to try completely different fields with another background. Men in my profession certainly became CEO of something where I was, how did you do that? I saw small differences. But it was again about equality. It's not about me being a woman or just, I didn't get it. But so it's about when it hits something emotional in you, and that would be different for anyone. Some will see major differences. Helena saw major differences. I couldn't see them. And I wouldn't say I was blind. It was just not a part of where I came from. So see, that's another, when you talk about context, don't blame people for what they don't see. And I see that a lot in communication when you talk about both context and content. We have a tendency to draft it in a way that everybody that doesn't feel what we're going through now is right are either stupid, unintelligent, and just don't get it. They might not get it, but maybe not for a reason that you think. So you shouldn't blame people. You shouldn't blame men, or you shouldn't blame people who doesn't understand different, cultures or people living in different ways. There's a reason why they don't get it. And you need to figure out what that reason is. But it's probably not because they're stupid. It's probably something else.
It's probably because of the context or the socialization that they grew up in and how they lived their life. And Louise just hinted to the 10 years of transformational journey that Louise and I have been on in terms of diversity and inclusion. Is there any kind of communication tools that we can find or that we can use when we talk about context? How do you first of all, how do you explore context? Who do you talk to? What is the key important stakeholders? Where do you find the context? But how can we also explore potentially what that emotional tick that you talk about for the individual that we can use to drive change? Is there any things in the communications toolbox that we can go to for that?
First of all, I would say research, and the other one, and there is a lot of research, because we have a tendency as communication people to be very rational. We get a task and we start, drafting key message with all the right words, and we take words in and out, and it seems stronger now, and we have no clue what we're talking about, especially in a context like you said, that cultures be very different. They just are. So it seems really perfect. But this is one of the areas, and again, I have to say it reminds me of the sustainability area. We need to connect and stakehold with people we don't agree with. Or people we don't know if we agree with. There's a lot of people out there who has very strong opinions either way on diversity and inclusion, and I would benefit from. I think you would benefit from following what they're talking about, where they're coming from, because the stronger people feel about something, the more you get into the core of what is going on in this discussion. So I think there's a lot of stakeholder management, and there is a lot of research, and there's a lot of, in many transformation, whether again it's a merger, a split up, diversity, inclusion, sustainability, we all need to be more educated when we do stuff, because we don't know what we're going into. It all sounds, not always, but it usually sounds very good and promising, but it's an area we most of the time don't know about. So you need to talk to stakeholders, both in the organization, but also outside the company, and follow the agenda in media. And it seems basic, but it's not basic. For example, but this discussion is changing by the day, by the hour, constantly, because again, it's back to equality. It's only being fueled now by a sustainability crisis where we see more, perhaps, inequality in the future. So there's a lot of agendas linked, and you need to understand you're part of a larger context constantly when you discuss it.
Yes. We actually, we normally say that diversity and inclusion is still under negotiation in both society, but also in organization. And it will be for a very long time, because we're just now starting to kind of drag up the words and try to use it in a different way. And that will create a lot of change resistance, first of all, and a lot what's in it for me. And especially if you have content in the communication style that, as you say, a bit more on the blamey side instead of the inclusive side, trying to, okay, what's in it for all of us, it will lead to more and more things. But what I'm actually also hearing you say, and going back to it, is out with the big bang, and then maybe don't communicate until you actually have succeeded in 2 or 3 projects, if you could say it like that. Actually, when you have done the change in 2 or 3 steps, and then communicate.
For example, the discussion I just raised to start by having that an open dialogue on a management level, then top, then C, then whatever, through the organization, have this discussion, talk openly about how do people feel, what do they think is, what's the impact on them, what will that mean to them, because it's about talking about it to understand it. You can key message a transformation into a corporate organization. You need to have an ongoing discussion and dialogue. Yeah, and that ongoing discussion. And Tonya, I'm pulling your question out of the chat right now, and hopefully also answering that, because Louise and you and I discussed also diversity and inclusion is a lot of different things. And suddenly under the pandemic, we recognized that introvert, extrovert was also a diversity dimension that we had to pay attention to. And for example, mental disability, something that you can't see, but is something that people may need to be aware of. But that ongoing conversation, whether it's through awareness training, it's talks, it's just that coffee conversation, is what drives that changes forward, and how we become better knowledgeable, more educated, and learn more about each other. And that for any D&I professional is key in order to succeed, because just as a communications professional needs to know what goes on in every corner of the organization, so does a D&I professional actually. It's the same kind of groundwork, going around all to the different desks that's on the floor and asking, what's in it for you, where you're at, what is the conversation that you are having right now. You can compare it to safety communication. So we have a history in safety communication where we told people what not to do. So don't do this, don't do that. You had folders like this. You could work on an oil platform, and you can read for the rest of your life about all the things you shouldn't do, until people rethought it and said, so how do I nudge people so to do the right thing? So can you make sure that you don't drop something in the head of people? Probably not, because you wouldn't do it because you wanted to, but because it was an accident. How do you prevent an accident? You do that by ensuring that people that can't walk below where you are working, because they can't get the thing in their head. So it's a very difficult, and safety communication, when it's really successful, is extremely tiring. It's ongoing reputation of people being told, oh, you didn't hold the handrail, please hold the handrail. Don't have 2 things in your hands when you're going up the stairs. And we had this in MERS for years, and the first year it drove me, and you had it done actually too, it drove me crazy, because you would, busy press lady going up with their phone in one hand and a plate in another, and people commenting on it. But it has an impact, because you start remembering not to do it, because you don't want, I just dropped an earphone. you don't want to have it repeated constantly. So you start changing over. And I remember when MERS moved out of the MERS building, when they were bought by Total, it was devastating, because people started sitting on the stairs certainly, and no one commented when you did something wrong. It was really weird, but that was how impactful that ongoing conversation was. That you actually felt insecure that when it was lost, not that just the fact that you couldn't have to talk anymore because people came into the building that was not used to that conversation. So you couldn't have to talk about, so you can't do this because they would be offended. So it's about repeating, and being allowed to have the conversation and address it. So when you're talking about people with disabilities you can see, or can see for that matter, if you see that something is wrong or people are treating this person in a different way or not respectful, you should be allowed, you should have a culture in your company where you're allowed to say, hey, you don't have to make the big confrontation in the canteen. You can find the person afterwards and say, that's not okay.
Yep.
Because this person is here for a reason, because he is a benefit for the company. And it doesn't have to be aggressive, or it's just being able to constantly have that conversation. And believe me, the first year is a pain,
yep.
But then it kind of get really nice because you can actually say what you want to say instead of standing with your two buddies at the coffee machine and agreeing on that. But you can have that discussion across the company. But it takes a lot of time.
It does. And now I'm one of those persons who can't walk down the stairs without holding a handrail. And I actually once got scolded by the CEO for not telling the person walking in front of me for not holding the handrail. That's how strong the safety culture was. But what you're actually also hinting to right now is a key element of any company trying to drive inclusive transformation. And that is securing, first of all, that you have that safe space that you talk about, where it's okay to have that conversation. We call it psychological safety. It's basically the same as a safety culture. It's just on our mental well-being and our human behavior. That first of all, we have a safe space where it's okay to have difficult conversations, but where it's also okay to call things out. And in that small processes, those transformation journeys then happen, but it's not something that we can see at the get-go. And when we do big projects and we do transformation, we want a KPI and we want to drive it, and then we want to see a result. But as you say, transformation happens in everyday life. It happens slowly and surely, but there are tips and tricks you can use. I just wanted the last 4 minutes, just one final question. This is a long-term journey, but there will be curveballs along the way. How do you plan for those curveballs? What if something happens in society that kind of throws this for a loop, or the stock market crashes, or the quarterly results were really, really bad, and now we're pulling resources out of the companies and we're scaling down your budget on diversity and inclusion and so forth? How do you plan for those curveballs that happen in any organization when you're on a long-term journey?
I think I touched upon it before. It's about having a long-term plan, but also if you get into the basics that we just talked about, so it's not about for everybody about being a woman or being a man. For some, it's about color, and for some, it's about disabilities. It's about a lot. So the basis is equality. So how do you handle that in any situation? So, for example, if your company get into major financial problems, you will know that the result of that might not be equal for your company, at least if it did what it always did. So you will find some percentage of the workforce and let them go. So if the company actually lifts the values and lifts diversity inclusion, it would not do that. It would look at how you could save the money across the workforce, from leaders to, you would call it blue collar in the old days, but you all the way through, or you would find other measures to handle it. So it's about finding the core of what you're working on in every situation. So like we said, COVID-19 was a great discussion for diversity and inclusion, because you couldn't be more secluded from other people, but still yet very included. I think we've all seen each other's homes. You've just seen a part of mine. I mean, there's a lot of things you can drive out of any change that will still focus your project. And that's why, but for transformation like that, that's why the big bang is not a good idea, because we know a big bang is it costs money in some way or form, and resources in some way or form. That's right, have a peak like this, and then everybody's ticket box, and then it goes down, and then you don't continue. So the more you include it in the everyday discussion. And that's why I always think start with the management, educate them so they can carry this, so it become a part of their leadership. That's what you expect from them as leaders. It's not a project, it's not a PowerPoint, it's a way of behavior they are supposed to live, whether they are leading people or hiring people or firing people, or going to the Christmas lunch for that matter.
Thank you, Louise. We have 1 minute left, so I'm gonna thank you so much for participating in this with us. It was great to have the band back together. I would almost say great advice, great input. I hope you all enjoyed it. This is part of our D&I Lab community, which is basically about sharing knowledge, about educating ourselves, but also our colleagues and our peers and so forth, and using that in a proactive way to drive the conversation on diversity and inclusion forward, both in organizations and societies as such. But that's it for me and Diversity Factor. We will send you an email afterwards with all of this. But Louise, once again, thank you for taking the time to do this with us. And then to everybody else, have a great day.